Anon asks, we are considering moving to Qatar next. Is that how I pronounce it?
Qatar, yep.
Qatar next year. We currently have some single stocks and mainly ETFs. Seeking clarity on what the process is for shares if/when we move. Can we still invest using our same account when we are not residents for tax purposes? And what the process is for shares when we move back, looking at being away for 3 years or so. Also with super, we want to continue to contribute while we are away. Are there any considerations we need to be aware of? And can we retain our insurances through super while living in another country? Let's just quickly tick off the super bit, then we'll get back to the shares and ETFs.
Yeah, well, yeah, salam alaikum, anon, and welcome to the sandpit if you do get here. Super's interesting. So at a high level, SIS Act, which governs all super,
In
Australia, residency does not apply to super. Resident, non-resident, the same rules apply both on capital gains tax, contributions, the whole shebang. The exception to that is SMSFs, which with the popularity of SMSFs over the last 10 years has been becoming more of a problem for expats. But let's put SMSFs on the side for the time being.
And that's because you have to be a resident trustee, right?
Not only that, it's the active members test. If you contribute to a self-managed super fund, you will breach the active members test.
Yes.
And also to central management and control has to be in Australia. A lot of folks try and rubber stamp it by appointing a brother or a sister or a father or a mother as the director of the trustee company, but that's just rubber stamping, and the ATO is looking straight through that because they're saying, how is it self-managed when you're the beneficiary and your brother's the trustee? It's
against the spirit of the
exactly.
Okay, get that for now, but
contributing super, we highly recommend it. It's not a precursor to being deemed a tax resident. It is an expat myth, usually purported by foreign advisors trying to get you to save into a 10-year Isle of Man bond that charges 7% interest. 7% in fees.
So just for my clarity, if I'm living abroad and want to put money into super, it can only be a non-concessional, right?
No. So if you have...
What's that change?
If you have property,
yeah.
So obviously as a non-resident, you don't have any Australian sourced income. If you have property though, which is positively geared, Australian non-residents get taxed at 30% on the first dollar.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you own a property earning $20,000 a year. You'll pay 30% tax on that $20,000. Or you can grab that 20 and chuck it straight into super as a concessional contribution, reduces your assessable income down to zero. You pay zero income tax and you pay 15% contributions tax. So you've now contributed to super and you cut your tax rate in half.
Yeah, but the average punter who's ducking up to London for 3 years and have extra money and don't have any income on the island here.
They would never do concessional.
Yeah. You can't use the concessional.
Well, you can, but you've got nothing to offset against, so you just got to pay 15% contributions tax.
More tax. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And we see a lot of folks doing that, unfortunately. They make the wrong election contribution into super, and they come to us, we do a statement of advice, and we go, why have you been making concessional contributions for the last 5 years? You don't have any Australian income. And they go, well, that's the only way I thought. I thought the super fund would have told me that. I said, no, they're just paid there to manage your money. They're not paid to advise you.
On the insurances, if you've got quality insurances set up in a retail fashion by a financial advisor, I'll go out on a limb to say they will be all good. I'll also go out on a limb to say there could be some issues with some group cover burned into, the standard super. Yeah,
look, I personally, I have my super back in Australia and I have a life and TPD policy, through that retail super fund. So it's definitely a requirement depending on where you are at your age of life. But to me, you need to understand the difference between group cover, which is assessed at time of claim, and page 42 in 4 font that the super funds and the insurance companies like to say that if you're overseas, you're ineligible. So we have met many, many clients. Every year we meet hundreds of people who are paying insurance premiums on their super when there's no possibility of claiming or it being accessible at all.
Yeah. So I think the important thing is there to see a financial advisor, to reach out to Sky Wealth or someone like that. Do you guys do insurance or you refer out?
We actually give it to Phil and Sky Wealth.
Yeah.
So we don't do it. To me, it's the expat insurance is a lot harder to get when you're overseas.
Yeah.
So in Australia, it's very simple. Overseas, you imagine trying to get a foreign medical center because it's assessed at time of inception. So they want everything on day one before they even agree to provide cover. If you're happy to go through that process, you'd be underwritten from day one, which is fantastic. But 9 times out of 10, that work is so complex, we just give it to Phil and his team.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. All right. So back to, can we still invest using our same accounts? So we've got a brokerage account, ComSec, NabTrade, Superhero, whatever, pumping ETFs and shares. We can leave that in play while we're overseas?
Not necessarily.
Right.
So there's 2 concepts here. And he asked a question about how it affects his shares. When you leave the country as a tax resident, property shares, they're all treated the same way from a capital gains tax point of view. When you leave the country, the classification of those assets splits between taxable Australian property, house, apartment, block of land, and non-taxable Australian property, shares, managed funds, any sort of digital assets, crypto. So when you leave the country, you have the ability to do what's called a deemed disposal. And that is where in the tax return on the year of your departure, you can say, hey, I'm happy to pay the CGT up until this date, which means then you've cut the umbilical cord for tax. And then from that date onwards, you do not accrue a capital gains tax liability.
Right.
So people forget that. And then they read when they get over here and they go, great, this is fantastic. I can buy shares back in Australia, capital gains tax free. Not realizing, yes, that is if you did deemed disposal on the shares you bought as a tax resident. If you did not do that deemed disposal, you're still accruing a tax liability in the background.
So the deemed disposal, for those who might be confused, it's literally an on-paper disposal and you pay some tax and you keep them invested.
Yeah, in your tax return, and it'll actually say what's your cost basis, what's the date, what's the price on the date of departure. And if you've made a gain, you pay capital gains tax. If you've made a loss, you accrue a tax loss as well too. So where it gets complicated.
So what do we do for this person who's saying they're going to be away for 3 years?
Look, you still do shares. The problem is it's the platform that people use. So with the advent of anti-money laundering, KYC, CRS, and all the acronyms that we love to throw around about compliance, a lot of the discount platforms in Australia have shut the shop to expats because it's more compliance work. Their margins for profitability are so thin that me here in Dubai, I know our clients because I sit down and have coffee with them. A call center operator for ComSec wouldn't have a clue who I am if I was a client. So they've just, if you ring up and say to them, hey, I'm now living in Qatar, here's my Qatari address, they'll freeze your account straight away. Then if you don't take action to move that account, they'll cancel the CHESS in and convert all the holdings to issuer sponsored, which is a big problem. And the reason it's a big problem because regionally we don't have postmen. So we don't get mail. So you imagine Computer Share and Link Market Services sending all those blue statements out with the SRN on it to the client. It goes nowhere. And now the registries have done their legal duty because they only have to provide the SRN once. Right. Anytime you want it after, you have to pay $110 per number. So we had one client moved here, came into here, called up ComSec and said, hey, here I am. It's about a $1.2 million portfolio on ComSec. They converted the whole thing to issuer sponsored. He then had to spend 4,000 Australian dollars going to all the individual registries to get that number for us to be able to in specie transfer it on. So it is a nightmare. So first thing you need to do is, in a general sense, work out whether the platform you're using is expat friendly, I guess you could say. Not many are, hardly any. And if they don't.
The only platform that is a superannuation trustee platform.
Well, actually, no. So there are platforms in Oz that do allow expats.
No. So, I mean, are we like your top high-performing, high-profile super funds, they're all considered, quote-unquote, expat friendly because you can just leave and keep putting money in.
Yeah.
Because they're not doing regular ID checks.
Exactly. Yeah, they don't care. They've got your money for the next 20 years, so they're pretty chilled about it. It's more the money laundering side. Yeah.
Yes.
So the ComSecs, the CMCs, there's a lot there when you go through, and if you just chuck the PDS of those platforms into a LLM, an AI model, you'll find all the verbiage saying non-resident, not allowed. So the ones we find who are sympathetic to expats are actually the advised platforms where you have to have an advisor on the platform, Hub24s, Netwells, Premiums, and those things, because the advisor has to go through that vetting process and AML process, so they're more comfortable you being on there.
Taking that risk, yeah.
People think, okay, I know how to shortcut this. I'll leave my Australian address on my CommSec account. The problem with that is if there are dividends being paid, we have what's called non-resident withholding tax. So whether you reside in a country that has a double taxation agreement or not will determine whether you have 15 or 30% automatically deducted from the dividend if there's no franking credits. So let's say, for example, someone's moving to the United States. That person moving to the United States, the US has a DTA with Australia. So if they're getting an unfranked dividend, then the share registry knows to withhold 15% because there's a US address on that account. If that address says Manly, they think you're in Australia. And now you've got the problem where if you don't have to do a lot of tax returns because you don't have property, just a share portfolio, because it's tax at source, people go, oh, it's tax at source, I don't have to do a tax return for the next 3 years. Now suddenly, it's never big numbers, but it's the complicating factor. You might owe the ATO $250 in non-resident withholding tax, but you spend $3,000 refiling your tax returns to go back and redeclare it. So it does get complicated.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is don't get cute, get a plan and make some concrete decisions before you go anywhere.
You think you're saving money by not getting a plan, and very rarely are we not cost neutral, I can guarantee.
So this is a question that, a week ago I wouldn't have asked, but with the at the moment confirmed changes, it hasn't passed legislation with the federal budget, I believe investment bonds are probably back on the menu in a big way.
Yeah.
What about if I leave the island and I've got an investment bond and I'm still contributing? Can I still get away with that, as opposed to because it's a platform like Super or the?
You can. It's not tax efficient as an expat though, because investment bonds, as you know, are taxed at 30% every year to give you that tax-free bit. Yeah. Whereas if I had an investment account with 5 ETFs back in Australia on a compliant platform, I'm paying zero tax. So you can do it, but it's funny, all these structures and systems we build when we're tax resident of Australia. So trusts, even before the budget, trusts weren't effectual for expats at all. SMSFs weren't. So we actually strip structures away. When clients move overseas for a reasonable amount of time, if it's 3 to 5 years, maybe 10, we don't want trusts. We don't want SMSFs. So the things that you build in Australia to save money, it actually costs you money when you go overseas. Bonds are one of those things as well too.
Yeah, unless you've got a couple of investment properties, your taxable income on the island here is more than the 30 anyway.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Hey, it's Glenn here. Thank you so much for watching today's video. You made it to the end. Can I ask a favor? Can you hit that like button and maybe hit subscribe if you want to get notified when we release further videos just like this one, whether you watch the Money podcast or Retire Right. And remember, if you want to learn more about investing, I've got an investing book, The Quick Start Guide to Investing, and there's a link in the description to get your hands on a copy. Thank you so much. Bye.